you generally, if you're investing for yourself, then don't worry so much about how the market values things, right? But if you are investing for yourself and for returns, make sure that you're doing your homework, and that's why we exist. We try to take the emotion out of a lot of this stuff and look at things objectively.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Richer Geek Podcast. Today, we have Stefan Von Imofh. And Stefan we're going to get into a lot of different, we've talked about real estate, we've talked about all these different things, but we're going to take alternative investing just a little bit further. Stefan is the co-founder and CEO of alts.co, ALTS.co. He has a strong background in alternative asset analysis and valuations. Prior to co-founding alts.co, he was head of product at Flippa, where he created the due diligence program. How you doing, Stefan?
Doing great. How are you?
Good. Hey, we're doing fine, and I can't wait. I get excited and kind of geeked out about alternative investments because too many HGTV episodes are telling people, fix and flips and Airbnbs, and they just don't realize that there's a plethora of other crazy different things that people can invest in. Tell us a little bit about AltCO, where you got started. What was your idea about going way alternative?
Yeah, thanks. So I think, it was about 4 years ago or so, three and a half years ago, I just started realizing what was happening with the retail investing space, namely that alternatives were starting to get really popular. It seemed to be happening really quickly all of a sudden. What I didn't know at the time was that a lot of this was due to the Jobs Act, which was passed by Obama. And that created something called Regulation A, which, long story short, led to the easy securitization of all sorts of different assets and for non-accredited investors. And so this regulation, basically created kind of like an explosion of new fractional-based startups. They kind of started in real estate, actually, right? With, a lot of the fractional real estate companies. But they we're starting to really blossom into all sorts of interesting things like cars and collectibles and just all sorts of different areas. And I realized, like, wow, this is pretty interesting. Around the same time, I realized that there's something really special happening on the retail side, where investors were really starting to shy away from financial planning, financial advisors, doing their own research, right, doing their own homework. That's a good thing and a bad thing, by the way, but it was definitely happening, right? And one of the themes we saw happening was people starting to just invest in all sorts of new stuff that they would never have invested in before. So the 60-40 portfolio is kind of starting to die, and people are starting to really think about investing into all sorts of new stuff. And so I basically just started writing about it. I started on Substack and just grew a pretty good following from Substack. And about 6 or 7 months in, there was another gentleman who had his own Substack newsletter. He was also writing about alternative investing. We were kind of coming at it from different angles. So I was coming at it more from like the website flipping space and digital assets and domains and kind of like side hustle kind of area. And this other person, Wyatt, who's kind of coming at it from the angle of like collectibles and rare books. This guy had actually created an algorithm for pricing and deciding the value of rare books, which I thought was really cool. And so we started talking, and we're like, look, we're kind of doing the same thing here. Why don't we just do it together? Let's just join forces and make something happen together. And I live in Australia. I'm an American living in Australia. He's an American living in Spain. So we never met in person, right? And it was kind of wild. We never met, but we decided to start the company together. And so that's how Alts was born.
So talk to us about, I've had some people on the podcast that they talk about artists. I'm thinking about maybe artwork and some of the other things where they're selling NFTs to maybe fund and maybe a way to invest. But what you're looking at is break it down to us, like when we're talking about within this fund, and we'll get into it in a little bit, where it might have X amount of this and X amount of that, and a little bit of artwork, some books, even some sneakers. It's just,
Yeah.
what exactly are you investing in? Is it like someone that wants to create a sneaker, or is it just a collectible sneaker? What is it that you're actually?
We're looking for the rarest and highest value alternative, eclectic, esoteric physical assets that we can find. So it's think of it as like an alternative investing hedge fund that's like way off the beaten path. That's the way to think about us,
Mhm,
right? So, alternative investing is nothing new. It's
mhm,
changed over time. It used to be and still is at the institutional level about, what we call like old school alternatives. So private credit, hedge funds, private debt financing, that kind of thing. Maybe a little bit of real estate, some REITs and stuff like that, but really nothing, what we invest in. We invest in, like I said, like off the beaten path, esoteric, eclectic stuff. I'll give you an example. So, I mean, some of the stuff in our fund is we've got artwork, British modern artwork. We've got a vinyl record that was owned by John Lennon. We've got toys, original Star Wars sealed toys. We've got comic books. We've got a Pele rookie card. We've got wine. We invest in tequila. We invest in whiskey by the barrel. So, I mean, yeah, it's like it's the kind of stuff that like other hedge funds wouldn't even touch with a 10-foot pole. And
mhm.
that's basically our whole bread and butter.
Yeah, and that seems very exciting to me. It's like, oh yeah, can I own a piece of a Ferrari three, whatever, 5% of it or something that it's just crazy. So when you get these things, are you actually physically buying them? And
Yes.
where do they go? I mean, do you have I'm sure a nice safe
So,
somewhere or a vault
yeah,
or
it's funny. This is the most embarrassing thing, but it's the truth. I've never physically seen or touched a single asset that we hold. And it's because they're in a set of warehouses and
Mhm,
vaults basically all over the place, right? So like the artwork has never left London. The whiskey is sitting sorry, the tequila's in the town of Tequila in Mexico in these big barrels, right? So it's like we've got all this stuff, but it's all stored and insured and vaulted. There's a whole sub economy that's kind of grown in the past, half decade or so to assist with stuff like that. But yeah, I mean that's basically it.
yeah, I had someone on the podcast that deals with really rare minerals, and he's saying, yeah, there's a vault that contains these. He's never seen them. He doesn't want to see them, but they're in London somewhere, you know,
I
and
would
a
want to see them. I wish I could touch the vinyl record, that's for sure. But yeah, it's funny with you say minerals though, because that's interesting. Like rare earths are definitely,
yeah.
I think an alternative asset. We've even looked at purchasing like an asteroid, like a very small piece of an asteroid. And like we explore this stuff, and it's just fascinating what we learn. I mean, asteroids, it's actually not a finite supply. It's pretty close. But yeah, every year there's basically like small meteor showers, and there's chasers, there's asteroid chasers that'll go to these middle of the Sahara Desert and find the pieces of rock that fell, and it's just unbelievable. And then they sell them in the markets of Morocco, and so like we haven't gone there yet, but like the sky's the limit. Like nothing's off limits. Like if it's alternative, like we're interested in it at least a little bit.
How do you analyze something? There's so many things that are one-offs and rare things. What is there something that you look at in particular, like that the return is going to be this, or is you just it's kind of like a cool factor? It's like, wow, this is a one-off, and I want to own something. How do you make a determination?
It's very much not just based on cool factor and gut and all that. So this is actually like what we do and why we exist is that we
Mhm,
we kind of got our start analyzing these esoteric asset classes, looking at data in a way that no one had ever looked at before, because half of the stuff is so new and was never really considered investable, right, in the past.
mhm,
Well, that's all changed now. The answer is in comps. That's it.
mhm,
It's just in comps. It's like in real estate, right? You look at the comps. Now, the difference with real estate is you type in a zip code and a square footage and you can get within 10-15% of the price of a house, like without question. Like we have so much data on this, plus it goes back 100 plus years. There's, all sorts of pieces of data you can feed into the algorithm, into the soup, to come up with a pretty good price range for a piece of real estate. Asteroids aren't like that, right? But there's always something out there. There's always something you can look at. So you look at the weight, you look at the quality, you look at you get experts involved and get their opinion on how it compares to recent auctions. But that's it. It's just all about the comps. There's always something you can compare it to. With some asset classes, you've got tons of data. With others, it's kind of thin, but you can always triangulate that price.
Yeah, because I'm looking down your list, and everyone, if you want to look at it, it's alts.co, and there's wine, whiskey, which I like, watches, which I like, and things that harken back to when I was a kid. The video games, the sports trading cards, sports memorabilia. Boy, I wish I had some of those Topps cards back, that I had when I was a kid.
You and me both, man. I don't pretend to have this huge collection. Like we're searching for the best of cards in the market, like everyone else, man.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: what is some of the cool? Give me an example. Some of the stuff is like going. You always kind of pull out there. It's like, yeah, we got this. Is there any?
Yeah. There's so much stuff. I used to say, like, I'm usually one of the more interesting people in the room at the party. I'd say my favorite is the vinyl record. So I'm a huge vinyl collector. I've got about 350 records. By the way, that is a whole fantastic asset class in its own right. But like many alternative markets, what really matters is the high end, right? Like the low end just doesn't matter at all. You need to be getting the best of the best. And so in the case of vinyl records, the best of the best is the Beatles is within the top 2 or 3, right? Like that's considered, like, old Beatles records in pristine condition are fantastic. The one that we have, we got at auction for about $50,000. So it's numbered 00000002. And the legend has it that the first 4 copies of the White Album of this record were given to all of the band members. All of the other 3 are accounted for. This is the only one that is not currently owned by a Beatle, and it was owned by John Lennon. And so we were able to pick this up at auction. And man, this is like a grail when it comes to records. So there's all sorts of interesting stuff, but that's my favorite one.
Yeah, it's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about how people get involved. You're introducing the Alts One Fund. Is that still?
Yeah. So our Alts One Fund is exactly it's a community driven fund. So it really comes down to our community. We've got a community of about 95,000 people. We're growing every week. And these are the folks who are investing in this fund. Now, you have to be an accredited investor. You do not need to be located in the US, but you do need to be accredited in your local jurisdiction. And the minimum is $20,000. The average investment is about $27,000. But this puts you into the fund. And this is, we're coming up on year 1, just right about around now. It's a 10-year fund. So we are not looking for quick flips. This is not the kind of thing where, we're going to have immediate, quick, mega returns or anything like that. We're looking for criminally undervalued alternative assets in the long run. And that's the idea.
So it'd be hard, man. After 10 years, I got to give up that vinyl record. I mean, at some point, So what do you think the plan is at the end of this 10-year? Is it number one? Is it an open or a close? And at some point, are you just going to stop it, and then the plan is to start selling some things off or reinvesting? Or what's your plan?
We have no immediate plans to. It's open ended, and we have no immediate plans to close it. But thinking ahead, about a year before we plan on closing the fund is when we'll start selling. Depending on market conditions, we'll start selling the assets within the fund. At that point, and probably a little bit before that, we'll close the fund. For now, it's just the NAV basically just changes every quarter. So you can buy in at any quarter, and the price fluctuates based on the total asset value. So yeah, that's how we're doing it.
What are you seeing in the next 3 to 5 years? What are some of the things that are hot? Because some of the things that I would have thought 5 or 10 years ago, like this is stupid, and all of a sudden it's worth crazy amounts of money. What are some of the trends are you seeing that might be a good alternative?
I think there's right now we're in a shift towards more like yield producing assets, right? So private credit, private debt, kind of this is where the old alts kind of shine as opposed to like the new non-cash flowing assets. But I think that's right now. In the future, I mean, it's anybody's guess. I think if you're buying into this fund, you're basically buying into the idea that you think ultra valuable museum grade collectibles are going to continue to increase in value. I absolutely believe that. We all believe that at the company. Not everyone may believe that, but I think what you're seeing out there is that there's new asset classes and everything right now, and stuff that you wouldn't even consider in a museum is now museum quality. And in fact, going into museums, I'll give you an example. The original iPod, the very first model of iPod, right? So that was that released in 07, 08, I believe. Um, if you bought that iPod, kept it in its box, sealed in its shrink wrap, in its box, and just stored it away safely, that cost, I think, when it was released, about what, $400, $500, that area. That is now a $30,000 alternative asset. That's what these are selling for at auctions right now. And there's not a lot of them out there, right? There's a handful. Like, we don't really know what the population is on these, but that's much better than Apple stock has done in that same time frame. If you bought $400 worth of Apple stock in 08, you'd be doing great, but you wouldn't have $30,000. So I'm not saying that'll continue forever. I'm not saying that we're going to get returns that are that good if we buy pristine assets today.
Yeah.
What I am saying is that the world has definitely come to an understanding that there's a real value in nostalgia and in keeping pristine copies of cultural relics alive. And that is something we absolutely believe in. We've seen this with artwork. I mean, artwork's been an investment for decades. Wine has been an investment for decades. Wine, artwork are incidentally probably the two best alternatives you can have.
Yeah.
But there's more. There's others out there. And that's what we're going and seeking.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, my gosh, why did I play with that toy?
I know. I know.
But
And what's funny about the iPod is it wasn't that long ago, right? I mean, this is
yeah.
08. I mean, maybe, I don't know, it doesn't feel that long ago. I guess it actually kind of is starting to be quite a while ago. But, 15 years, that's not that long for that kind of investment. That's pretty insane. That's pretty crazy. And so, there's always speculation, like, what's going to be the next thing. It just takes time. It's always obvious in retrospect, but we know value when we see it. We only look for the best, and we have the confidence that the market will value it the way we do.
And I can see how, and I don't know if you see like natural resources being kind of overworked right now, but you're looking at all these green pushes and alternative fuels and all these minerals that you have to have in order to have just the new batteries and all these different types of things. And the rare minerals, you can't just go dig a hole, and we know that China has most of that stuff.
Australia has a lot too, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
the rare earths, the cobalt, lithium, and a lot of that's, I mean, we're getting way into, esoteric world, but yeah, a lot of that stuff that the supply is controlled, like in Bolivia by the government. And so there's a lot to be said. I mean, we just did a big thing on diamonds. What's happening with diamonds now is they're getting standardized in a way that they never were able to get standardized before. So a bar of gold has been like a standard for decades, but we don't have that with diamonds. So there's a company now called Diamond Standard, which is doing exactly that, and they're creating bars of diamonds, diamonds, just like gold. And this is creating a standardization in the market that's going to turn diamonds into yet another alternative investment that's liquid, right? That's the key, is liquidity, and you need standardization for that. So there's just so many companies working on so many different areas and doing interesting things in the space. Some are going to succeed phenomenally, others will fall by the wayside, but the tide keeps going up for all of this stuff.
Yeah. And what are some of the things that people wouldn't even think about? I had someone on the podcast that you could invest in Broadway musicals
Yeah.
as an alternative. Some people you can he wanted the very first Air Jordan something or other, and it's just some of these court cases, in court. That's alternatives. Like,
Oh,
what do you mean?
litigation financing.
Litigation
Yeah.
financing is
Yeah,
an
so
alternative.
so like litigation finance and Broadway financing, that almost falls in the realm of like it's almost like a type of venture capital, right? Where you're making a lot of bets and most of them don't pay off, and then the few that do pay for all the other ones, right? And then some. It's kind of like venture in that way. Those are fascinating. I mean, look, this is what we do. There's so much cool stuff out there. I'd say some of the most interesting stuff. There's a few that come to mind. We looked at investing in fine cigars for a while.
Mm.
Didn't really like what we found, but it was definitely interesting to explore. We've looked at what one thing we have done is we've invested in vintage concert posters. So this is literally just posters from like the 60s and 70s before digital art was big. You'd have these nice elaborate posters for like the Grateful Dead and what have you. And it's not a huge, massive market of collectors, but the people that collect them are willing to pay for the grails. And so we have like in our fund, we've got the second most expensive concert poster ever sold at auction ever. It's a Grateful Dead one from the 60s. It's a very famous one. That was a fun one. I'd say the most interesting thing that we've explored. Now, we haven't invested in this in the fund, but the most interesting thing we've explored over the past year is, you ready for this?
Mm.
It's rare, what we call heritage license plates. It just so happens that here in Australia, in Melbourne, Australia, where I live, this is the epicenter of this market. The market is all about buying low digit license plates. So just like a license plate that just says like it just has number like 106 on it or something like that, or number 15 or lucky number 7. These go for millions if they're in the single digits, millions of dollars. In fact, they never even come up for sale anymore because no one's selling them. You're maybe lucky to get not a 2-digit, not a 3-digit. You're maybe lucky to get like a 4-digit plate now. That's how crazy the market's gotten. And that market is now expanding. It just so happens to be the epicenter here. But Dubai, there was a recent sale. There was the number 7 United Arab Emirates license plate sold for I think $21 million. Right. So, I mean, this is fascinating stuff. No one knows this market even exists, but there's a growing group of hardcore fanatics that are into this stuff. And we haven't even made an investment in it in the fund. I just think it's a fascinating market that I didn't even know existed up until 3 or 4 months ago. So yeah, there's all sorts of esoteric stuff out there. It really is amazing.
What are some of the things, and that amazes me because I didn't know you could. I thought you had to like turn them in. I thought, like here in the States, I can't sell my license plate. I mean, it's goes with my car, and then if I sell my car, the license plate's no longer valid.
These are worth more than the car, and you can sell
Yeah.
different. I mean, most of the time, I'm not going to get too much into it, but there's entire Facebook groups that are just dedicated to what they call plate spotting, which is, people like will see like the number 65 on the freeway or something, and they take a picture and they upload it to the group, and everyone's like, "Oh wow." People know who owns some of the low digit ones. Like it boggles the mind.
Yeah,
It's
it's amazing.
unbelievable.
What are some of the things that people need to kind of be wary about if they want to get involved in this space? It's just not everything old is valuable, right? But what are
Yeah,
some of the things that you need to kind of warn people that think
I'd
that this
say
is interesting?
every market's different, but generally speaking, you kind of want to keep emotion out of investing to some degree, right? There's kind of a few schools of thought on this. Some people are like, actually, no, the emotion is what counts, and You should be buying assets because you love them first and foremost, not because they're good investments. And I actually I totally agree with that. There's plenty of cool stuff, quirky stuff that I own that isn't actually that valuable to the market, but it's valuable to me. It's got sentimental value, or I just like it, right? I've got vinyl records that I bought for $10 that I play, once, twice a week. No one else wants them, but I freaking love them. Then I've got records that, like I know are worth $500-$600, and it's like, so I guess you generally, if you're investing for yourself, then don't worry so much about how the market values things, right? But if you are investing for yourself and for returns, make sure that you're doing your homework, and that's why we exist. We try to take the emotion out of a lot of this stuff and look at things objectively, and just make a case for why we think X, Y, and Z. I mean, I think there's one thing to know about us is we don't have an agenda as we're exploring and writing about this stuff. Like, we don't, not everything's a buy, not everything's a sell. It's just, we go into each opportunity, we kind of just objectively look at the pros, the cons,
Mm-hmm.
and take people along for the ride. And I think people appreciate that, and they might not always agree with our assessment, and that's fine. But yeah, I mean, we're basically just out there just trying to educate, and for ourselves mostly, and then just kind of take everyone else along for the ride.
Yeah, and there you go, everybody. And I always harp that don't do it yourself. Let the experts do it for you. So if you've wanted to own a very small piece of something extremely cool, you probably don't have the money yourself to go out and buy it. So that's why alts.co, this is why these types of funds, the Alts One Fund, exists. So it's just cool. It's like, I own a piece of vinyl record that was once owned by Lennon, a very small piece, but you actually own it, and you can brag about that. And I would tell everybody I met, just like, guess what I own, or a piece of that I own. And it is the cool factor. And this is why we have people like Stefan on, is you can invest and diversify your portfolios into something extremely cool and hopefully very lucrative. And when you put it with experts like Stefan, then your chances of success are tenfold, 100-fold. Stefan, where can everyone find you?
You find us at alts.co, just alts.co. Come to the site, sign up for the newsletter. If you like what we're putting out there, we're happy to have you, and reach out to me anytime.
And LinkedIn?
Yep, we're on LinkedIn, and just email me. I read every email we get. We're an email-based community, so I read everything you get. Stefan at alts.co.
There you go. And everybody, again, it's alts.co. Stefan, I appreciate you coming on the Richer Geek. It's been a blast. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Michael.